half Dominican until I got older. They broke it to me like it was bad news. I've talked about the differences of Latinos. One thing we all have in common, we love our grandmothers. You remember when your grandmother turned 40? I do. Through this journey, I had an opportunity to go to the Dominican Republic and meet my father for the first time. We sat in a restaurant. Every time a woman walked in, he'd be like, "That's your sister." He was so generous, he gave us each our own mothers. He was like, "Oprah, you get a mother, you get a mother." People were throwing up Black Lives Matter signs during the marches, and they only put up them signs so that nobody would break their windows. They're marching up our street, Lucille, throw the sign up. Hurry up, hurry up. I don't want to be woke. They're always, oh, words hurt. I'm like, so do uppercuts, bitch. Learn how to block. Too much truth for you tonight?
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we are super thrilled to have literally one of our favorite people who occupy the planet, actress, comedian, producer, just she's everything, Aida Rodriguez, to talk to us about her special project she has with HBO Max. We're gonna kick things off by introducing you to the folks who are on our roundtable today, starting with our facilitator, Rhonda Rasha Penrice in Atlanta, Aisha Muhammad in Atlanta, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, and Nancy Green in Baltimore. I'm gonna let you ladies do what you do so very well, and I will see you on the other side.
Hi, Ida.
Hi.
The question I have for you is, like, I know that some of your inspiration or a lot of your inspiration comes from your experience with your family growing up. How does that play out in your home life? Like, what's your relationship like, and actually having to deal with your family and let them know that you're using some of the real life experiences in your stand-up? Because I know you said in your previous stand-up that your step pop was actually one of your siblings' real father.
Mm-hmm. So, some relationships have been severed, and I'm okay with that because I want to tell the truth. A lot of times I've been having a rough day today. Like today's been a rough morning for me. Just understanding how my project is resonating with some people, and I have to be okay with letting some people go because I want to tell the truth, because I think that the only path forward is to tell the truth. My stepfather is the father of my siblings, and we talked about colorism offline. I dealt with a lot of colorism, and it's very odd for people to understand because of my hue, my complexion, my texture of hair, which would be ideal in another setting, which is also affected by colorism. Because the people in my family are so white, I am the indicator that there's dark blood, and I had to suffer some of the, the stuff that, a lot of people suffer and dark-skinned women have to deal with on a daily basis. So I'm okay with being not okay with some people because I want to tell the truth. The people who love me and got me and really understand that we are about telling the truth are still here.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that question.
Hi, Ida. It's Carolyn for Here's What Happened in Carolyn Talks podcast. So the title of your new comedy special is called Fighting Words. And in this particular, in the Black community and in the Afro-Latina community, fighting words is like, like when someone says something, you're like, ooh, you're ready to really throw down and really get to the heart of the matter, as we would say. And for this special, like your words would be considered fighting words, but like you use comedy in such an effective way that it can throw off people, and suddenly they don't catch the joke until like maybe a couple seconds later, or maybe And then I want you to talk a bit about using your comedy and as fighting words, but as a way to get people to understand that what you're talking about is social commentary. You're talking about class. You're talking about racism. You talked about the Proud Boys, and you talked also about your family and the dynamics between Dominican and Puerto Rican people. So can you just talk about using your fighting words and comedy together?
So I thank you for that. I made a decision that I was going to be who I was in comedy, and it was really hard for me, right? Because I have some really good friends who are very successful in comedy, and their style of comedy is very different than mine. But I understood that I can only be myself. And so, like I said, I've raised a Black American and Caribbean daughter and son, and they both have had to deal with some of the issues that I've dealt with in life. And if anybody who knows me knows how much I love my kids and my kids are my world, I started taking note of like some of these issues and how they're going to affect my children. And a lot of things came from there. But I opened for Paul Mooney, the late great Paul Mooney, and he told me my journey was going to be harder because of the kind of comedy that I was doing, and to never change and to go harder. And so this one was my go harder. I really wanted to address some of the issues because I feel like Black and brown people are negotiated constantly in this country and abroad, and always used as pawns for politics and social issues. And there's been this good side, bad side, and all of a sudden it's turned into this blue, red, conservative, Democrat, Republican. And I just look at the conditions of our people, and I consider myself someone who identifies with my Africanness. I identify with my indigenous blood. I identify with the darker hue in me. What in administration has actually been good for our people? Like who has really improved the conditions of our people? And so when I think about these revolutionary comedians who are like going in on Donald Trump and talking about Republicans, I think a lot of people get to skate off of that for not doing what they're supposed to be doing when it comes to the fact that we are watching Black and brown children going to rob people now. You see it more and more. You see the conditions of the people. And for me as a comedian, I don't feel like it's not real for me if I'm not talking about the stuff that's real. So I wanted to confront real issues. Yes, colorism is awful and it affects everybody, because if you're light skinned and you're walking around thinking that you're better than a dark skinned person, you definitely have an illness. They got you too. It's not just the dark skinned people who are walking around feeling like the victims of this. You too are a victim of this. And it is hurtful and it is harmful to you as well. And so I just felt like it was time to confront these issues. I talk about them in my stand-up all the time. Men get to enjoy being, people laud Dave Chappelle, who's a great comedian. They laud Bill Burr. They laud all these men for being that way, but women don't get celebrated for that. I get shoved in the closet. There are women, they tell us don't talk about sex, but then you talk about the biggest comedians in the industry who are women talk about sex, and they do what men do because they feel like they need to do that to survive. I don't do that stuff. And I'm always getting shoved in the closet because I'm too controversial. I'm too in people's faces. So I'm ready to go. I'm like, well, let's burn it down then, because at the end of the day, Black women matter, Black children matter. My kids matter, your kids matter. And if I'm gonna stand on stage and say I'm a mother and I'm gonna say I'm a woman, then I'm gonna speak to the things that I feel are important. And if these guys can do it and get awards and get recognized for it, I do it because I want to really improve the conditions of the people. And I'm going to continue to speak fighting words beyond this special. It's going
Great.
down.
Thank you. Sometimes we gotta throw it down. You gotta get the words out, because if we don't, nothing else can change, right? We have to at least speak up when we can and however we can. Thank you.
Hi, Nancy with Film Critique.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi. I really enjoyed this special. It was hilarious. It was so funny. One of the things that I was curious about, because for me, I don't know the difference, or it's not so much that I don't know the difference. I don't understand, why is there such a negative outlook on the Dominican Republic people? Why, Dominicans, why is that a thing? If you can explain that.
Sure, because they present Black more than the other islands. there is a farce, this misnomer that Dominicans are the only anti-Black people in Latin America because they have conflict with Haiti. But those are all like the effects of colonization. So in the Dominican Republic, they had leadership, a president that was very anti-Black and was murdering people.
Oh
So
my
there's a history of that on the island, and it is embedded in the DNA. So that's self-preservation. It really is self-hatred, right? It's not even because you hear Black people from Latin America talking about Black people and you confused because you like, you are the Black people. What are you talking about? So the Dominican Republic, which presents more Black because of the presence of the mixing with Haiti, there's a lot of stuff. There is this ideal that the darker people of Latin America, like in America and in Europe, are less than. And that's all rooted in white supremacy. And mainly capitalism is really what it comes from, but it's so rooted in anti-Blackness. And so the Dominican Republic gets it really bad for that. And so people criticize people from the Dominican Republic for not speaking the King's Spanish, for being darker, for the texture of the hair. And it is, it's just unfortunate because it's a beautiful island filled with people who, there are many Black people in the Dominican Republic who are proud to be Black and love themselves. But just like everything else, that's not who gets the press because that's not juicy, right? You never hear about the Black people who love themselves in media.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you for asking that, because I think that a lot of people really come down on the Dominican Republic really hard, and it scapegoats a lot of the other people in Latin America who also practice anti-Blackness, because it's a global issue. Indians, people in Africa, people in North Carolina practice anti-Blackness. So thank you for that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hey, Ida, congratulations. This is absolutely hysterical and so important. It like put me in the same frame of when I saw Fontaine with Whoopi Goldberg when I was younger. So tell me, I know that this has long been a brand of, your comedy. This is your signature, you give the truth. But did you feel like with this special that you were on another level?
I don't, my children do, and the people around me do. I have a little bit of, I battle with worthiness issues. So if I'm being honest, I never think I've done anything. And so for me, I did feel like I had a bigger platform, and I had an opportunity to say something that I've been saying and that I wanted to say. And when you get advice as a comedian, some people give you bad advice. And I remember people saying to me, like, don't try not to be so aggressive and go so hard and talk about the stuff and I was like, oh, my inclination was to go deeper and to go harder, because I was like, now I have the microphone. I want people to know that these things are happening. But yes, because of the type of work that I had to put into for this special, during COVID, and not only going out and risking my life to go out and perform in front of live audiences, but having to pivot and do shows on Zoom. It took a different type of stamina that I didn't know I had. So if I'm honest, I would have to say that, yes, I do believe that I did something different, and it was something that would be considered a different level.
I think a lot of people can't even appreciate the brilliance of, having such hard-hitting topics, but still always maintaining the level of funniness. Like, the humor, you just strike such a perfect balance.
Thank you. That means the world to me. I really appreciate that, because, it's hard to talk about these things, but I feel like if I don't, then who will? There's this big void in comedy that uplifts us, because it's so much of the difference between Black people. And the difference is always that we do things jankier, or we do things less than, and that's the joke. And the joke is not always on us, because the reason we do things jankier is because there's a reason for that, and that we don't have any control over, because Lord knows if the playing field was evil, I mean, it was balanced, we'd be just killing it on all fronts. Look at what we've done and how much we're still standing in spite of. That's what keeps me going. Is I knew what my grandmother told me about the people in my family, my lineage, and where the slavery ended, the technical slavery ended, and when freedom began. So I know how far that goes back with me. And I know that my grandmother didn't even know how to read because she never learned how to read. So that's what keeps me going, is knowing the resilience of melanin, and that we're still standing and that we're still here. And so that's what I'm like, oh, look at what we are, a dream realized. And so when we talk about comedy, you think people talk about George Carlin to this day. He was trending yesterday, #1, because they were talking about, of course, abortion and abortion rights, which we all know is also very rooted, which I talked about in my special, rooted in white supremacy and classism, and to hold people of color and poor people down. So I just sit here and think, why not me? That's how my brain works. I don't want to make jokes making fun of. I've seen comedians go on stage and make fun of dark-skinned Black people, make fun of light-skinned Black people, make fun of, people who are mulatto, people who have impetigo. And I sit here and I think my mind doesn't even want to work. All I want to do is glorify us. I want to exalt us. And I don't need to be celebrated by the enemy for that. I just want my people to acknowledge that that's what I'm doing, because it matters. Because, this is how we document history. And sometimes it's not the books that we can rely on. It's a Richard Pryor said that when he talked about the N-word and made a decision to address it, that is history for me. That I learned something from that, that I did not learn in a history book. And so when I think about the future, when people go back to my comedy, I want people to feel proud of being Black and brown and saying, she was talking about us in a way that nobody else was, because we matter that way.
Oh, yes. People learn something for sure.
You're an inspiration to so many people. I myself have Latina friends who have said the same thing about, experiencing colorism within their family from their grandmothers, uncles, and aunts. And you're the first person that I heard ever really address it, especially during a stand-up. If you had anything, a legacy to leave, or something that you wanted to say to encourage young Latino girls and boys who are going through the same thing within their family, this kind of racism, what would you want to say to them?
I would say, what I did was I started finding history, and I went to Black American history, and to as a map to get to my history, to understand where I came from, because what we do with, the Latin community is everybody tries to act like we this group. They're like, we're the Latinos, right? And then you think about Central South America, the Caribbean, which I belong to. I have more in common with Carolyn in terms of food than I have with Mexican people, because we're Caribbean. We eat plantains, we eat rice, we eat peas. We have a kinship that we were colonized differently, but we are so connected to the motherland because a lot of our food comes from Africa. A lot of our practices, you think about people from Jamaica who who practice the Rastafari religion that comes from Ethiopia, like that. We're so connected in that way. So I had to find my history outside of the history that they were giving me, because that history was making me feel like I didn't exist. And so what I tell young people all the time is that there's so much power in reading. I was told in 3rd grade by a teacher that readers are leaders, and that the way to get out of the hood was to read. And I took that on so heavily. I read everything because I was like, I gotta get out of here. And the way I'm gonna get out of here is learning these words so I can do well on the SAT. So I always tell young people to look at the books. Like, I'll show you. I can't help myself. There's this book called An African American and Latinx History. And in this book, you understand what happened in history and how Latinos and Black American people are connected and how our history intersects. And that the more you learn about yourself, the more pride you get, because we always get taught that we were colonized, we were raped, we were pillaged, we were stolen, we were slaves. But there's a rich history beyond that that no one has ever taught us, that we were kings and queens and that we have power, and that we need to learn that, because white people get to learn about their history, their conquests, and how they come from royalty, and the people who will tell you, oh, I'm from Ireland and I'm from Germany and I'm quartered this. They have a history that instills what feeds their privilege and their power and how they feel about themselves. And we need that too. So for me, it's always been about finding me in the books that I didn't get at school, because I knew there was something off with what they were telling me. There was like, there's something great about me that I don't learn here. So I got to go find it somewhere else. And I'm going to start sharing my book list so that on social media, because I hate social media. So I have to figure out what to do on it so that I don't feel like I'm participating in this thing that is always feeding to these young people that they got to go get nose jobs and that they got to lighten their skin and they got to look perfect. So for me, it's going to be sharing my books, because man, oh man, they did a number on us.
That's great. And I know you're not having, you had a rough day today, so I'm sending you healing energy, and I want you to know, please be inspired, because you are an inspiration to a lot of people.
Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. That means I'm trying not to be the crybaby today.
Hi, Ida. I'm Carolyn again. So a lot of your special, a lot of your comedy, you deal with a lot of very personal things. You deal with a lot of your personal history and your relationship with your parents and your relationship with your dad, which was cut short because you lost contact with each other. And in Fighting Words, when you go back to the Dominican Republic, you get to meet him after years of separation. Can you just tell me exactly how much that meant to you, not only because of your rediscovering your roots culturally, but also familially, but being able to have your two kids with you on that journey? Because the thing with a lot of, unfortunately, especially in the Caribbean, is a lot of us grew up usually only in a single parent household, and it's usually our mothers. Like, I didn't meet my dad until I was 8 years old. And that's something that's very prevalent in the Caribbean. So when you touched on that in your special, that was something that I really related to, because a lot of people think that once you meet your parents, the one that you've been estranged from, that is just immediately fixed. And you're like, no, it does not fix everything. And it can take years to even come to an understanding about who you are as an adult, who your own parent is as an adult. So can you just talk about exploring that personally and through comedy, and having your kids be there to witness that? Because I think it's just something very profound to do that on your own homeland and have your kids watch you go through this very, I think, profound personal experience.
So thank you for that. The first thing I wanted to do with that was I wanted to make sure that little Black and brown kids who did not grow up with their fathers know that they were going to be okay. Because here is this grown woman who has now grown children on HBO Max who grew up without her father, and she's okay. Because I grew up thinking there was something seriously wrong with me because my father wasn't around. And they don't use this term anymore, but I remember being called illegitimate because I didn't have my father's last name, and being called a bastard. And so I was really affected by that. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that we confronted the shame and the guilt that comes from that, because the reason why a lot of fathers in the Caribbean are not there is because of what happened during slavery, right? So when we talk about this, we don't ever go underneath why this happens. It just becomes like, oh, they got 18 children, and it comes from slavery. It comes from being taken away from the family, and we see the effects of it. And for some reason, we thought this was going to magically disappear, when just because the slavery is gone, but the actual institutionalized slavery that's still here is still doing what it's doing. And so I wanted to make sure that I know I addressed that because I know what I wanted to be what I needed when I was a kid to other people. And so I remember just thinking to myself, what it meant for me. First of all, I wanted to show Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in all of their hues. I wanted to show people that um, Black people exist in Latin America, and they're not all begging for money on the street corner. They're not all hungry and poor. And so for me, that was what it was about. And sure, meeting my father was something that I needed to do for my own personal healing, because that lack of his presence has manifested itself in other issues that I have, primarily with relationships with men. But I wanted to do all of that. And I really wanted to show, I wanted to pay homage to the Black people of Latin America in the Caribbean, who you never really see other than being maids on people's TV shows and Univision and Telemundo.
Thank you so much
Hi.
for just being so honest, because I think it's important that a lot of people realize that there's more to the Caribbean than just our music. We have a very deep culture with regards to family as well. And like that thing you said about history, a lot of it is conditioning for sure, about how Black men were conditioned to like go basically from family to family to family. And like that's like, yeah, it's very deep cultural conditioning for sure.
Thank you.
Hi, Nancy again. And I wanted to ask you, how do you go through the process of deciding what it is that you will talk about, especially since so much of your material deals with sensitive topics and your family and things like that? Because you managed to put in there like some very sensitive things that were just hilarious. And so I was wondering how you go through the process of elimination with that.
So I storyboard every set. And when I did They Ready, I did that too. I sit down and I said, because innately I'm a filmmaker, and that's my goal, is to make movies. And so comedy was the a U-turn that I made during this business, because my film career didn't take off as an actor, or as, it didn't take off as an actor. I'm very tall. So I decided to start telling my stories through stand-up. And so I was like, I storyboarded like I would do a movie, and I come up with what's the story I'm going to tell, the beginning, the middle, the end. So for Fighting Words, it was mainly about, confronting the issues that have to do with my father, but I broke it into social issues, social issues, cultural issues, my family issues, and relationship issues. And then I write a story, and then I fill in the story with the jokes. And like for They Ready, it was about getting kidnapped twice. And so that was what that story was about, but I storyboarded. And I wanted to show in the special, that was what the part of the documentary was, also how we mine our jokes, how that stuff about my father actually becomes stand-up, and how it goes from that raw, emotional, sad thing to jokes. And so I sit down, and I have notebooks all over here, and I'm sitting down just thinking about all the stories I want to tell.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. And thank you so much. And I really enjoyed your special.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
You too. You too.
Hey, it was so interesting. When Michael Che was on The View, Joy Behar said she had never heard of Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil. And I was like, so when you said it, I was like, oh yeah, like everybody says this. How did they miss it? But
I said it in my special.
yeah, I was like, everybody says this. How did you miss it? But you just said something that's very interesting that I think a lot of people don't understand about being too tall in the industry. Because the first time I really heard that, or even being in LA, you see how short the actresses of color tend to be. But Pam Grier had said when they were talking about what's love got to do with it and her not getting the role, that part of the reason she didn't get the role is because she's too tall. Like she's like, I'm 5'8", like Lawrence Fishburne wouldn't have been able to throw me around. So can you kind of expound on that? Because I don't think that anybody ever talks about
Especially, you know what I think is funny is when it comes to women of color, right? Because Sigourney Weaver is tall, Charlize Theron is tall. There are a lot of these white actresses are tall. Nicole Kidman, I've seen her in person, is taller than me. So I think that because they have the privilege, they have the opportunity, they create a way for them, they have the right reps, they have the right opportunities. But then you think about, you know, Black women. Can you imagine a bunch of Black women that are tall in Hollywood who already stand up with the presence of knowing that they are queens and come from, you know, are the cradle of civilization, and now you're gonna put them on set with these little itty bitty white dudes that you know, have to assert their power? Like it would be, Hollywood would be done. And when you say stuff like that, people will say, oh, she always making everything about race. But the reality of it is that white supremacy lives in so many things, so much that they are always trying to shame us for our age, because you know good and well Angela Bassett don't look like she in her 60s. So why you got to point out that she in her 60s? Because she don't look like she's in her 60s. So the thing is that it's all of these things are little tools of white supremacy that they employ to keep the status quo, to keep the dominating, the ruling class in power. Because, and height is not exempt from that. The exceptions that are made for white women who are tall in Hollywood, from digging ditches to apple boxes, and they invest in that. But when it comes to women of color, oh no, she was just too tall. But it's really, she's just too tall. She got a strong personality. She got a force. She don't have that. She not having it. So yeah, they want to keep us little. And so for me, being 5'10" Puerto Rican Dominican who identifies as Afro-Latina, there aren't that many opportunities for someone like me. They don't, I mean, in the breakdowns, where are the roles? There aren't any, you know. Even now when they're teetering around this Afro-Latina thing, they're going for the lighter hued people. And for me, like I have a TV show at HBO Max that I've been trying to get made for the last 2 years. And it's dark-skinned Black women are beside me on the show because that's my real life. Like my best friend is a dark-skinned woman. It ain't a clique of us walking around looking like, you know, Jane Kennedy, all friends. Like we come in all hues, and that's the reality of what it is to be one of us. But if you look at us on TV, it's, and then when it comes to Latin people, Latinos, Latinx people, Latina people, we 20 years behind. Like we're not even on TV like that. We don't have TV shows because we can't get it together as a collective. We are still tearing, we burn each other down. So when it comes to height, I mean, it's been a challenge for me the whole time. It's the great excuse to keep me off of something because of my height. And I say this with all the love in my heart because I don't want to sound like the bitter person who's not getting stuff. It's just at some point we got to speak up, because when we don't speak up, nothing changes. And just like Oscar So White revolution had an active revolution that made changes, I feel like I'm not getting anything anyway. So what do I have to lose? So I might as well just speak the truth. And the truth is they're not gonna mess. They don't want to mess. What mediocre average white person gonna want a dynamic person of color that is also towering over them on their set? That just show up being dynamic just for being dynamic. And I'm not just speaking about myself. I'm speaking about a nation of people who you never get to see represented in Hollywood, like because they know, like that's magic, and people gravitate towards the magic. And so I've been battling with that for a very long time. That's always one of the bigger excuses, you know. And you could tell me my audition sucked, I didn't land it, and I could deal with that because I can go work on that, right? I can go get a coach and get better, or go take a class, or really just redirect. I can do nothing about being 5'10". And so that's the easier thing to say is, hey, you know, you're just too tall, because there's nothing I can do about being too tall.
Well, Ada, I got you beat at 6'2".
Hey! I love it. So my one of my closest friends is also really tall. She's a Black woman. She's actually a producer and a writer on the Black Lady Sketch Show. And we don't see that. We just be walking around like, What? That we live here too. Like we cannot exist. We gotta write a show about tall women to show tall women. Like, is that what we're gonna have to do? Because it's so, and we're not basketball players. Like, at what point? You know, like it's always that's when you get a role if you're gonna be a basketball player, a volleyball player. But we can't have a black account executive that's 5'10", like in the real world. It gets old.
It does.
Yeah, today's that day for me. I got time today. I got time today.
So I'm 5 foot, so I'm shorter than everyone here. But I kind of actually my question is kind of tied into your height, because I love what you wore for your comedy special, and I want to talk about the choices you made visually, because like you, as you said, you're 5'10", and your outfit is the leather a leather jumper, and your legs are exposed, and you're showing like I'm tall. And to me, I kind of saw that as you kind of embracing your hand. You're telling these people, I'm gonna command this stage, and I'm owning this stage. And then like your hair is parted, and you have the two cornrow pigtails, and like you made a reference to it because you said your mom used to do your hair like that all the time, and so you're kind of doing it, as I saw it, as an homage to your heritage and to your mom, and like and to what your mom used to do for you. And even your bracelet, it was clear, but I was like, are those snowflakes? And I'm like, if that's a snowflake, that's such a genius kind of touch onto the topics that you're discussing on, talking about white supremacy and like racism. So can you just talk about using your visual appearance to tell your own story apart from what you're saying as a comedian?
So I can't even tell you how happy I am that you notice those things, because they always feel like they just fall. So the white thing that I had on is actually a sustainable outfit that's made out of sustainable fabric that was made by a Latin designer who came to me. The symbols that are on my thing are Taino symbols from the Taino natives of the Caribbean, which also were in Jamaica. And I did wanted to pay homage. My great grandfather, who I knew till I was 14, was Taino. And so, yes, and there were snowflakes on the thing. You know, it's just like I told you, the desire to want to make film and the pain of not being able to have the opportunity or the resources to make it, and having to find a way to do it in the comedy has always been the healing for me. And so, yes, I always think about what I have on. And I do lean into being tall, and I don't apologize for it. And I won't apologize for it, because there are a lot of us who are tall who didn't play basketball and just had to be here on the earth, and being reminded that we ain't good for nothing if we didn't use our height for something, as if we couldn't use our height to show up in a courtroom or on a set. So all of that was part of the thing. And the funny thing is that my visual aids, my fighting words binder is right here, and that outfit was inspired by these symbols. Like the designer and I actually went through the whole thing. Every single aspect of that special is in this book, because I take storytelling very seriously. And so I wanted to honor the people of the Caribbean, all of them, not just Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, because Tainos belong to us all. Africa belongs to us all. And so it was a very conscious decision to do it with the subtleties. And then the shoes were Tom Ford, because Angela Yee from the Breakfast Club bought them for me, because she was like, wait a minute, you got to wear some cute shoes. But the outfit was definitely all part of the plan. Thank you for asking that, because I was like, nobody's asked me about it. And I was like, those are the symbols. That was just, all of those cutouts were symbols from our native tribes from the Caribbean.
No, I love that. I love the outfit, because I am, like, as I mentioned, I'm Barbadian. So like for us, the indigenous people of Barbados were Arabs and Arawak. So like there are some symbols that are very similar to the Taino. And for and I'm glad you mentioned Taino, because I don't think a lot of people realize that for Jamaica, the indigenous people are the Taino people of the Caribbean, right? So like, I think it's important that you do mention that. And I love that you included that into your stand-up special, into your art as a comedian. So again, thank you so much, and amazing special, and I hope a lot of people see it, and it will create a lot of discussion for sure.
Arawaks also inhabited the island of Borinca in Puerto Rico, which is why people say Boricua, but it was Arawak and Taino. So yes, and the Bayesian people definitely have such a beautiful history. Again, congratulations, because I think that's a win, always a win when we get them people off our backs.
Thank you. Yeah, good riddance to the monarchy. Hey, whatever. Sorry, let me not get too political.
Ida, one last thing before you go. You know, I know you said you had some things up and coming. What can we expect next from you going forward?
Woo, Gil. We are sitting here wondering what's going to happen next. We're trying to figure out what's going to happen with the TV show that's at HBO Max, which we're still waiting on. And I have an animated series that I'm working on with ITV Studios. And, you know, I hope to write a book this year. I've been approached by different people about books, but I want to just tell stories. You know, I want to write movies and I want to make movies. And that's what I'm focusing on. At this moment, I'm just focusing on writing and creating my next thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Ida, on behalf of the African American Film Critics Association, we thank you for your time today. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, thank you for watching this edition of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.